The lottery ticket sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days, a flimsy rectangle of paper ignored between a stack of bills and a grocery list. It wasn't a symbol of hope, not really. It was just part of a weekly ritual, a silly little dream I'd buy for $2 at the corner store, something to talk about with my son Leo. But as the silence in our small house grew thicker, that ticket began to feel less like a dream and more like a time bomb, ticking away the final seconds of the life I knew. How could a simple piece of paper, marked with my late wife's birthday and our anniversary, become the verdict on my entire life? Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing more. For years, this house had been my sanctuary, a place filled with the echoes of my wife's laughter and the scent of her baking. After she was gone, Leo and his wife Clara moved in. They said it was to take care of me, but we all knew it was because they couldn't afford a place of their own. I didn't mind. The quiet was the hardest part of being alone, and their presence, even with its struggles, filled the silence. I'd watch Leo at the dinner table, his shoulders slumped from another long day at the warehouse, his hands rough and calloused. I saw my own younger self in him, and ached for the weariness in his eyes. Clara would try to stretch a single chicken to feed the 3 of us for days, her face a constant mask of strained optimism. I gave them most of my pension check every month, keeping just enough for my medication and that one lottery ticket. It was my house, but we made it their home. I saw the way Clara would look at the faded floral wallpaper in the dining room, her lip curling just slightly. I saw how Leo would stare out the window at my old rusting truck in the driveway, a muscle twitching in his jaw. They were dreaming of a different life, one without chipped mugs and squeaky floorboards, and I couldn't blame them. Then came Tuesday night. We were watching the news, the television's blue light flickering across our tired faces. The lottery numbers scrolled across the bottom of the screen. It was just background noise until Leo suddenly sat bolt upright, his fork clattering onto his plate. He scrambled for the counter, snatching the ticket. I watched his eyes scan the numbers, once, twice. His hands began to shake, a tremor so violent the paper rattled. Clara was on her feet in an instant, her voice sharp. "What?" "Leo, what is it?" He didn't answer. He just held the ticket out to her, his face completely drained of color. I'll never forget the look that came over Clara's face as she read the numbers. It wasn't pure joy. It was something sharper, harder. It was the look of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. Her eyes, which had always held a sort of weary kindness, became as cold and reflective as glass. They didn't cheer. They didn't hug me. They stood in the center of my kitchen, under the flickering fluorescent light, and just stared at each other, a silent, terrifying agreement passing between them. That was the moment the air in the house changed. The silence that followed wasn't the comfortable quiet of family. It was the dead, heavy silence of a tomb. For the next 2 days, they moved like ghosts around me. They'd whisper in the hallway, their voices immediately ceasing the moment I entered a room. Clara stopped cooking. Instead, they ordered expensive takeout, the smell of steak and garlic filling the house while I ate a can of soup at the kitchen table alone. Have you ever watched someone you love turn into a stranger right before your eyes? It's like watching a photograph fade to white, the person you knew disappearing pixel by pixel until only a hollow outline remains. I tried to talk to Leo on the 3rd day. I found him in the living room, staring at the worn armchair where his mother used to sit, a look of profound disgust on his face. "Son," I began, my voice feeling rusty from disuse. "We should talk about this, about what comes next." He didn't turn to look at me. His eyes were fixed on a water stain on the ceiling. "There's nothing to talk about," he said, his voice flat, completely devoid of the warmth it once held. "Clara and I are handling it." His words were a wall, and I was on the outside of it. The we he spoke of no longer included me. The life they were planning, the future bought with that ticket, was a place I was not invited. The dread that had been simmering in my gut turned to ice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to their muffled voices from the other room. Words like escrow, listing, and dead weight drifted through the thin walls. I finally got up, my joints aching, and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. I saw Leo standing by the back door, silhouetted against the moonlight on the phone with someone. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, only his chilling, quiet words. "No, it won't be a problem," he said. "He's old. He won't fight it. We just need to clear the property before we can sell." I stood frozen in the dark hallway, the glass of water trembling in my hand. Clear the property. He was talking about me. I was no longer his father. I was just an obstacle, a piece of old furniture to be removed before the real owners could move in. He hung up the phone and turned, his eyes finally meeting mine in the dim light. There was no shock, no guilt on his face, just a cold, hard finality. He took a step toward me, his expression unreadable. "Dad," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You and I need to have a little chat. You need to understand. Your world is about to get a lot smaller." That little chat he wanted wasn't a conversation, it was a sentencing. He didn't raise his voice, which somehow made it worse. Standing there in the dim light of the kitchen, my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike and bait a fishing hook, calmly dismantled my life, piece by piece. He told me they'd already spoken to a realtor, a financial advisor, and a lawyer. He used words like asset liquidation and portfolio diversification that sounded alien in our humble kitchen. He explained that this house, my home for 40 years, was their first major asset. The proceeds from its sale would be the foundation of their new life, a life that had no room for its old foundation. He confessed that they saw my monthly pension contributions not as a help, but as a pathetic reminder of the poverty they were escaping. "We're moving on, Dad," he said, his eyes avoiding mine, focusing instead on the frayed cuff of my pajama sleeve. "To a place where people don't have to count every penny." The shock wasn't a loud explosion. It was a silent, internal collapse, like the structure of a building giving way from the inside. I felt the cold from the linoleum floor seep up through the soles of my feet, a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. I leaned against the counter, my knuckles white, the rough, worn laminate the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly turned to liquid. My voice, when I finally found it, was a dry rasp. "Leo, this is your home? Your mother? She loved this house." A flicker of something crossed his face. Annoyance, maybe even shame. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same unnerving emptiness. "Mom's gone," he said flatly. "And this isn't a home. It's a starter house we never got to leave. It's a dead end." He was talking about more than the house. He was talking about me. I was the dead end. The silence stretched between us, thick with everything he wasn't saying. I thought of his mother, how she'd planted the rose bushes by the porch, how her hands, dusted with flour, had shaped the life within these walls. Was all of that worth nothing? Was it just an asset to be liquidated? How do you reason with someone who sees you not as a person, but as a problem to be solved? Just as I was about to plead, to appeal to the son I thought I knew, the kitchen door swung open. Clara stood there, wrapped in a new silk robe I'd never seen before, the price tag still visible on the cuff. Her face was scrubbed clean of any pretense of warmth. If Leo was the judge who read the sentence, she was the architect who wrote it. She looked from me to Leo, a sliver of impatience in her eyes. "Is it done?" she asked, her voice like chipping ice. Leo nodded, still not looking at me. I was just explaining things. Clara let out a sigh, a sound of theatrical weariness, as if dealing with me was the most tedious chore in the world. She walked over to the coffee maker, her bare feet silent on the floor, and began preparing a pot as if it were any other morning. The casual domesticity of the act was a grotesque parody of all the mornings we had shared in this kitchen. "Look," she said, her back to me as she scooped the coffee grounds. "It's really very simple. You're of a certain age. There are facilities for people like you. Very nice ones, I'm sure. We'll find one." She said the word, facilities, like she was talking about a kennel for a dog they could no longer keep. The smell of the coffee began to fill the air, a scent I used to love, but now it was acrid, burning the back of my throat. I pushed myself off the counter, my legs shaking. "You can't," I whispered, the words barely audible. "You can't just throw me away." Clara turned then, her coffee scoop held in her hand like a gavel. Her eyes were hard, calculating. The mask was completely gone. This was her. This was the person who had been living under my roof, eating my food and taking my money, all while seeing me as nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. "Throw you away?" she scoffed, a small, cruel smile touching her lips. "Don't be so dramatic. We're giving you a new opportunity, a place with structured activities. You won't have to worry about bills or cooking or taking care of this big, drafty house." Her gaze swept around the kitchen, lingering on the peeling paint by the stove and the crack in the ceiling. It was a look of pure contempt. This wasn't just about the money. This was about erasing a past she was ashamed of, and I was the biggest, most stubborn part of that past. Leo finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes broke the last thread of hope I was clinging to. It was pity. A distant, sterile pity for an old man who just didn't get it. He was already 1,000,000 miles away, living in their new future, and I was just a ghost he had to deal with first. I felt a surge of anger then, a hot, protective rage for my wife's memory, for the life we built here. "This money," I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. "It's a curse. You don't see it yet, but it's already poisoned you." Clara laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that echoed in the quiet room. "Oh, please, don't give us the 'money is the root of all evil' speech. Money is the root of everything we never had. It's freedom. It's the end of worrying if the car will start in the morning. It's the end of buying discount canned soup." Her eyes narrowed, and she took a step toward me. The final blow came without warning, delivered with the casual cruelty of a child pulling the wings off a fly. "We've been carrying you for years," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Living in this dump, pretending to be a happy family. We paid our dues." She gestured around the room at the worn linoleum, the faded curtains, my entire life's work. "We don't need your pennies anymore. Get out." The words hung in the air, vibrating with a hatred so pure it felt physical. Leo didn't protest. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets, his gaze falling to the floor as his wife evicted his father from his own home. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger toward the front door. "We're going to the bank tomorrow to start the process. I want you gone by the time we get back. Pack a bag. I'm sure one of your old friends from the VFW hall has a couch you can sleep on." She turned her back on me then, dismissing me completely, and poured herself a cup of coffee, her hand perfectly steady. The slam of their bedroom door was a sound of finality, like a coffin lid closing. I was left alone in the kitchen, the bitter aroma of Clara's coffee hanging in the air like a taunt. I didn't move for a long time. I just stood there, listening to the hum of the old refrigerator, a sound that had been the steady heartbeat of this house for my entire adult life. It had never sounded so lonely. Every object my eyes landed on was a memory. The faint scratch on the wooden table where a 5-year-old Leo had carved his initials with a fork. The chipped porcelain knob on the pantry door, smoothed by my wife Martha's hand 1,000 times. They weren't just throwing me out. They were erasing a history they no longer wanted to be a part of. Slowly, like a man walking underwater, I made my way back to my bedroom. The room was small and simple, filled with things that mattered only to me. My old army uniform, sealed in a garment bag in the back of the closet. A framed photo of Martha on my nightstand, her smile so real it felt like she could speak. The air in here felt different, safer. But now, even this sanctuary was tainted. I pulled a dusty canvas duffel bag from the top of the closet, the zipper groaning in protest as I opened it. The rough fabric scratched my knuckles. What do you pack when you're leaving your whole life behind? Do you think a person is born with that kind of coldness, or does it grow in them like a sickness? I watched Leo grow. I saw him cry over a scraped knee. I held him when he had nightmares. I couldn't pinpoint the moment that boy died and was replaced by the cold-eyed stranger in my kitchen. Was it a gradual erosion of his soul, or did the prospect of wealth simply flip a switch? I started with the practical things. A few changes of clothes, my shaving kit, the bottle of pills for my blood pressure. Each item felt impossibly heavy. My hands moved stiffly, my joints aching with a weariness that went deeper than bone. I picked up the photo of Martha. Her eyes seemed to see right through me, offering a comfort that felt a million miles away. I remembered her telling me years ago when Leo was a teenager, "Be careful, Will. He has a hole in him that he'll try to fill with things." I thought she was just talking about teenage materialism, about him wanting the fanciest new sneakers. I never imagined the thing he would use to fill that hole would be $125 million, and that I would be the price he was willing to pay for it. I gently wrapped her picture in a soft wool sweater and placed it in the bag. Next, I opened the small wooden box on my dresser. Inside lay my dog tags from the war, cold and metallic to the touch. Beside them was Martha's wedding band, which I'd kept since she passed. It was simple and worn thin with time. I slipped it into my pocket. It felt warm against my palm, a tiny ember of a life that had been full of love and quiet dignity, a life that now felt like a story about someone else. The house was silent. They must have gone to bed, dreaming of their new kingdom built on the rubble of my own. I looked around the room one last time. My gaze fell on the old tweed jacket hanging on the back of the door. It was the jacket I wore every Friday, my good luck jacket for buying the lottery ticket at Mr. Henderson's corner store. It was a silly superstition Martha used to tease me about. A wave of profound grief washed over me, so intense it buckled my knees. I wasn't just losing a house. I was losing the last physical connection to her, to the life we built in these rooms. Every corner held an echo, every floorboard whispered a memory. The thought of Clara's cold voice and sterile plans for this place, of realtors and strangers walking through, judging the life stains on the walls, was a violation I couldn't bear. My hand went to the duffel bag, to zip it up, to accept the finality of it all. But then I stopped. A thought, cold and clear, cut through the fog of my sorrow. The ticket, the one on the counter that Leo had grabbed. Something about it felt wrong. It was part of my routine, as ingrained as brushing my teeth. I buy the ticket on Friday. I put it in the ceramic bowl on the counter. Then, on Tuesday after the drawing, I check the numbers and throw it away before buying the new one. But last week, I remembered being interrupted. The phone rang just as I got home from the store. It was my sister checking in. I'd walked into the living room, jacket still on, and talked to her for nearly an hour. The ticket never made it to the bowl. A sudden, frantic energy surged through me. My hands, which had been trembling with grief, were now shaking with a different emotion. It was a wild, desperate flicker of something that might have been hope. I stumbled toward the door, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached for the old tweed jacket. The wool was rough and familiar under my fingers. I plunged my hand into the right pocket. It was empty, save for a crumpled receipt and a lint-covered cough drop. My spirit sank. Of course, I was just an old man, confused and grasping at straws. But then I tried the left pocket. My fingers brushed against a small, crisp rectangle of paper. It felt different from a receipt. Thicker. I pulled it out. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. Under the dim light of my bedside lamp, I smoothed it out. The numbers were there, printed in neat black ink. And above them, in the space for a name that Mr. Henderson always insisted I fill out, was my own handwriting, clear and simple. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that cracked the frozen mask of my face. I looked back at the closed bedroom door, behind which my son and his wife were sleeping, dreaming of their stolen fortune. "Son," I whispered to the silent house, the words a quiet promise of the storm to come. "Did you at least read whose name is on this lottery ticket?" They had looked at the numbers, but they had never looked closer. They celebrated a victory with a piece of paper that was utterly worthless. And the real prize, the one that would change everything, was right here, safe in my hand. The first light of dawn was a pale gray smear against my bedroom window. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the hours sitting in my worn armchair, the real lottery ticket held loosely in my hand, its smooth, crisp edges a stark contrast to the rough calluses on my palm. It wasn't a piece of paper anymore. It was a weapon. It was justice. And the quiet dread that had been my constant companion for 3 days was slowly, deliberately, being replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. The sound of their alarm clock buzzed faintly through the wall, followed by the muffled thumps and whispers of them getting ready for their big day. I heard the shower run. I heard Clara's clipped, excited tones as she talked about which bank had the best private wealth management. They were like children on Christmas morning, giddy with the promise of presents, completely unaware that the gift they thought was under the tree was a box of empty air. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have confronted them right away, waving the ticket in their faces? Or would you do what I did? I chose to wait. Their cruelty hadn't been a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a calculated, deliberate act. They had sentenced me without a trial. They deserved to feel the full, crushing weight of their mistake. I folded the ticket carefully and tucked it deep into the inner pocket of my old jacket. Then, I continued to pack my duffel bag, but with a new purpose. I wasn't packing to be homeless. I was packing for a new beginning. When they finally emerged from their room, they were dressed in their best clothes I'd bought them last Christmas. Leo wore a collared shirt that was too tight around his thickening neck, and Clara was in a dress that looked cheap trying to be expensive. They carried an air of contrived importance, like actors playing the part of wealthy people. They saw me by the front door, my duffel bag at my feet, and a look of relief washed over Clara's face. "Oh," she said, her voice bright with false surprise. "You're all ready to go. How efficient." She didn't ask where I was going. She didn't care. Leo, to his credit, had the decency to look uncomfortable. He shuffled his feet and stared at a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. "Dad," he started, but the words died in his throat. He couldn't even look me in the eye as he kicked me out of my own home. "It's for the best," Clara finished for him, stepping forward to usher me toward the door. Her hand rested briefly on my back, a gesture that was meant to seem gentle but felt like a cattle prod. "We'll call you," she lied, her smile never reaching her cold, empty eyes. "Once we get settled." I didn't say a word. I simply looked at them, letting the silence hang in the air. I looked at my son, the man I had raised, and saw only a hollow shell, a stranger wearing his face. I looked at his wife and saw a black hole of greed that had consumed him completely. I wanted to burn this final image of them into my memory, the sight of their smug, self-satisfied faces as they cast me out. It would be fuel for what came next. I smiled. It wasn't a large smile, just a slight knowing curve of my lips. It was so out of place, so contrary to the pathetic, defeated old man they expected to see, that it momentarily threw them off. Clara's smile faltered. Leo's brow furrowed in confusion. "Why are you smiling?" Clara asked, a sharp edge of suspicion in her voice. "Just thinking about something, dear," I said, my voice calm and even. I turned, opened the front door, and stepped out onto the porch I had built with my own 2 hands. The morning air was cool and crisp, smelling of damp earth and the roses Martha had planted. I took a deep breath. It felt like the first clean breath I had taken in days. I didn't look back. I walked down the path, my footsteps steady on the cracked concrete, and headed down the street. my duffel bag slung over my shoulder. I didn't go to the VFW hall. I didn't go to my sister's. I walked the 8 blocks to the bus station. The journey felt surreal. I passed houses where I knew the families, gardens I'd watched grow over the years, kids I'd seen grow up. It was my neighborhood, my world, and I was walking away from it like a ghost. At the station, I bought a one-way ticket to the state capitol, a 3-hour ride away. As the bus pulled out of the station, I finally allowed myself to look back. I could just see the roof of my house over the trees. My house. Their house now. For a little while longer. The bus ride was a blur of passing towns and green fields. I didn't see any of it. My mind was focused, sharpening its point. They believed their new life started today, with a trip to the bank and a call to a realtor. They had no idea that their downfall had already begun. They were celebrating a phantom victory, armed with a worthless piece of paper. And as they walked into that bank, full of arrogance and pride, they were walking directly into a trap. Because while they were busy claiming a prize that wasn't theirs, I was on my way to the one place that could validate the truth. The State Lottery Commission headquarters. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the bus window and closed my eyes. They hadn't just kicked me out. They had underestimated me. They saw a weak, forgettable old man. They were about to find out that the quietest people often carry the most resolve. Their world wasn't getting bigger. It was about to collapse, and I was the one who was going to pull the pin. The State Lottery Commission building was an imposing tower of glass and steel, a sterile monument to dreams and random chance. It was the last place on earth I ever expected to find myself, but as I walked through the automatic doors, the cool, air-conditioned lobby felt like a gateway to a new reality. My reflection in the polished marble floor was that of a stranger, a tired old man in a worn tweed jacket, carrying a duffel bag, looking utterly out of place amongst the sharp suits and confident strides of the people around me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. Do you think I was too forgiving up to this point? Maybe I should have screamed, fought, broken things. But that wasn't my way. My anger wasn't a fire that burned hot and fast. It was a deep, cold river, and it was carving a new path. I approached the main reception desk, a vast expanse of gleaming mahogany. The woman behind it looked up from her computer, her expression a practiced blend of politeness and boredom. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her eyes flicking over my simple clothes, a subtle dismissal in her gaze. My voice was steadier than I expected. "I'm here to claim a prize," I said. Her eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. "Of course. Do you have the winning ticket?" For a moment, a sliver of panic pierced my resolve. What if I was wrong? What if I had misremembered, or the ticket was a misprint? It felt like the entire world was holding its breath. I reached into my jacket, my fingers closing around the crisp rectangle of paper. The touch of it, the solid reality of it, was instantly grounding. I laid it on the counter between us. She picked it up with an air of professional detachment, her eyes scanning the numbers first. She showed no reaction. Then, her gaze moved to the top of the ticket, to the space where I had signed my name. She froze. Her eyes widened just for a second before her professional mask snapped back into place. She looked from the ticket to my face, then back to the ticket. The boredom was gone, replaced by a sudden, sharp attention. "Mr. William Sterling?" she asked, her voice now carrying a tone of careful respect. "Yes," I said. "That's me." The change was immediate. She stood up, a flush rising on her cheeks. "Right this way, Mr. Sterling, please." She led me from the public lobby through a set of secure doors into a hushed, carpeted hallway. The air back here felt different, thick with the silent weight of money. We entered a corner office with a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a stunning view of the city below. A man in an impeccably tailored gray suit rose from behind a large, empty desk. He was older, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice warm. "I'm Arthur Vance, Director of Claims. Please have a seat." He gestured to a leather chair that sighed as I sat down. The receptionist handed him the ticket and quietly exited the room, closing the door behind her. Mr. Vance sat down and examined the ticket under a desk lamp, his movements precise and unhurried. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the faint whisper of the air conditioning. He looked up at me, his expression serious. "This is, of course, the grand prize winner from Tuesday's drawing, $125 million. He said the number so calmly, as if he were commenting on the weather. The words seemed to hang in the air, too large to comprehend. "We've been waiting for the winner to come forward." He paused, his gaze thoughtful. "And you, Mr. Sterling, are the first person to present this ticket. Your signature is right here." I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He leaned forward slightly, his demeanor shifting from professional to something more personal, more human. "May I ask, Mr. Sterling, has anyone else been in possession of this ticket?" And there it was, the question that would ignite the fuse. I took a deep breath, the sanitized office air feeling thin in my lungs. I told him everything. I told him about Leo and Clara moving in after Martha died. I told him about giving them my pension, about the struggles, about the dream of a better life we all seem to share. My voice was low and even, a measured recounting of facts, but the taste of betrayal was coppery in my mouth. I told him about them finding the other ticket, the decoy, the worthless piece of paper I must have left in my jacket from the week before. I described their reaction, the coldness in their eyes, the chilling whispers, the way they had turned into strangers overnight. And finally, I told him how they had thrown me out of my own home that very morning. As I spoke, Mr. Vance listened without interruption. He didn't take notes. He just watched my face, his own expression a mixture of empathy and a kind of weary sadness, as if he had heard 100 different stories of how money could corrupt the human heart, and mine was just the latest tragic chapter. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Greed is a cancer," he said, his voice soft. "It eats away everything good in a person." He picked up his phone and pressed a button. "Helen, could you get our head of security, Mr. Davies, and our chief legal counsel, Ms. Albright, and ask them to join us, please? And bring a notary." He hung up and looked back at me. "Mr. Sterling, what your son and his wife have done is more than just cruel. Attempting to claim a lottery prize with a fraudulent ticket, especially after coercing the rightful owner, that is a serious crime." The words "serious crime" echoed in the quiet office. It was one thing to feel betrayed, but it was another to hear the legal weight of their actions. This was bigger than a family argument. This had consequences. Real, life-altering consequences. A few minutes later, a stern-faced security chief and a sharp, intelligent-looking woman in a dark blue suit entered the office. Mr. Vance quickly and concisely explained the situation. As he spoke, I could see the legal mind of Ms. Albright at work, her expression shifting from curiosity to focused intensity. She looked at me. "Mr. Sterling, are you willing to press charges?" The question hung in the air. Could I do it? Could I send my own son to prison? I thought of Leo as a boy, his small hand in mine. Then I thought of his cold, dead eyes in the kitchen, as Clara told me to get out. He had made his choice. He had thrown the first stone, and it had been aimed directly at my heart. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "Yes, I am." Ms. Albright gave a single, sharp nod. She turned to Mr. Vance. "Arthur, where would they be right now?" Mr. Vance glanced at the clock on the wall. "If they left this morning to claim the prize, they would have gone to one of the regional claim centers. It's standard procedure for any prize over $1,000 to be initially verified there before being sent to us. There's only one center in his town." He picked up the phone again, his movements now filled with a quiet urgency. I watched, my hand resting on the arm of the chair, my knuckles white. Somewhere, in a much smaller, less impressive office, my son and his wife were living out the last few moments of their fantasy. They were probably feeling impatient, annoyed by the bureaucracy, eager to get their hands on the money they believed was theirs. They had no idea that the sky was about to fall, and I was the one who was about to pull it down. The next hour was a blur of legal documents and quiet, purposeful activity. Ms. Albright, the lawyer, moved with incredible efficiency, drafting affidavits and explaining the process in a calm, reassuring voice. She treated me not as a victim, but as a man making a stand. Mr. Vance arranged for a wire transfer of a preliminary sum into a new bank account. Enough, he said, to ensure I would never have to worry about a roof over my head again. He also had his assistant book me a suite in a quiet, upscale hotel nearby. Each signature I placed on a document felt like a hammer blow, sealing my son's fate while simultaneously forging my own future. There was no joy in it, only a grim, profound sense of necessity. The final act was a phone call Mr. Vance made, putting it on speaker for us all to hear. It was to the manager of the regional claims center in my hometown. "Mark," Mr. Vance said, his voice level. "Arthur Vance. I believe you have a couple in your office attempting to claim the grand prize, a Leo and Clara Sterling." A weary voice came back over the speaker. "Arthur, thank God. Yes, they're here. Been here for almost 2 hours. The ticket they presented is obviously not the winner. It's from last week's drawing. They're becoming quite belligerent, insisting there's been a mistake, threatening to sue. Honestly, I was about to call security to have them removed." The sound of Clara's distant, shrill voice could be heard faintly in the background, a high-pitched whine of entitlement. My stomach tightened. Mr. Vance's eyes met mine across the desk. "Mark, don't have them removed just yet. The local police department should be arriving any moment. Detain them on suspicion of fraud. We have the rightful winner, Mr. William Sterling, here in our office, along with the authentic signed ticket." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a low whistle. "Well," the manager said, "this just got a lot more interesting. I'll keep them occupied." Mr. Vance hung up. He looked at me, his expression one of deep sympathy. "It's done, Mr. Sterling. The wheels of justice are in motion." He was right. I had set a landslide in motion, and there was no stopping it now. I stood up, feeling 100 years old, and yet strangely lighter. "Thank you," I said, the words feeling inadequate for what they had done. "Thank you for believing me." Ms. Albright walked me to the door. Relic from a life that no longer existed. My old life had been burned down to the foundations, and from the ashes, something new and uncertain was beginning. I thought of Leo and Clara. I pictured the moment the police officers walked into that small office. The confusion on their faces turning to shock, then to disbelief, and finally, to the cold, stark terror of being caught. I imagined Clara's carefully constructed mask of superiority shattering into a million pieces, her shrill demands turning into desperate pleas. I imagined Leo, my son, looking down at the handcuffs being snapped around his wrists, the metallic click echoing the sound of his future slamming shut. There was no satisfaction in the image, only a vast, aching emptiness. That night, sleep offered no escape. I dreamt of Leo as a child, laughing as I pushed him on a swing, his small hands holding tight to the ropes. I woke up in the dark, my face wet with tears, the ghost of his laughter echoing in the silent, empty suite. The moral of this story isn't about the corrupting power of money. Not really. It's about what happens when we forget where we come from. My son and his wife saw me as a relic of a past they wanted to erase, a symbol of the poverty they despised. They failed to understand that the foundations I built, the love, the sacrifice, the quiet dignity of a simple life, were the only things holding them up. They thought the lottery ticket was their foundation, but it was just paper. When they kicked me out, they didn't just lose a father. They kicked out the very pillar of their own history, and without it, their world was destined to collapse. What do you think is the hardest part of a betrayal like this? The act itself, or the realization that you never truly knew the person you loved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.